Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Pod Save the Youth. I'm your host, David Seaton, and today we are going to talk all about the process of running a city as a young person. And we're so happy today to be joined by an incredible guest, and I will let her introduce herself right now.
Hi, happy to be here with you. Thanks for having me today. I am Kassandra Gove, and I'm the mayor of the city of Amesbury. Happy to serve my hometown here and talk a little bit about it with you.
All right, well, let's get into the discussion here today. So, right now, America's mayors do not look like America. Right now, the average age of an American mayor is 57 years old, and only one third of America's mayors are women. A large portion of why this is because mayoral elections don't often correlate with general elections with high turnout. They're often in the spring or in the early fall when voters aren't really motivated to vote for other offices on the ticket. So you get a very underrepresentative sample of the actual population. Right now, the likeliest group to vote in mayoral elections are people ages 65 and over. This clearly does not represent youth or people of color or new communities in a city, making the process of running as a young mayor and changing a system that has governed a city for a very long time increasingly more difficult. So, Mayor Gove, what made you decide to run for office despite these headwinds that young candidates and women often face in joining the political process and starting a campaign?
Great question, and really good data and information there from sort of a broader perspective. I really feel like anyone who runs for office runs because they think they can make a difference. I'm sort of an eternal optimist. I really felt like I could add and bring my skills and experience to the mayor's office to make Amesbury a better place and make really professionalize our government, make everything we do more efficient, modernize what we're doing here, and uh, I was unhappy with what I was seeing, and that's again, I think why a lot of people decided to throw their hat in the ring. I had gotten really involved in our community as a young person, as a young professional. I was working with our Chamber of Commerce. I had gotten a chance to peek behind the curtains and was going to council meetings and getting the chance to really work closely with our department heads and city staff and see how things were really running at the city, and I just felt like it could be better and that I had something to offer. So I was a little bit I had a little just enough of a naive you know piece of what I was going in with to say I can do it and throw my hat in the ring, a little bit of what you need to just go for it, feeling bold and really strong relationships in our community. I grew up here. I'm a fifth generation native, and I felt like I could really bridge the gap between the older adults in our community who have very strong feelings about Amesbury's history and also what we really needed to have moving forward. And one of the slogans I used in my campaign was preserving our past, preparing for our future. I felt like I had a unique blend of that experience because of my family history here, and was running against an incumbent who did not have a family history in town. So I felt like I was well positioned and I had the experience that we needed.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear. And I do think you bring a very interesting perspective to a race as a young person, because usually when we think about young people, we're thinking about people who don't really have very much experience in the institutions that they're running for, right?
Mhm.
People who are breaking down barriers to get into office. But as you said, you were part of this Amesbury community for your entire life. And that's, as I said, very different from a lot of younger candidates. So maybe that
Mhm.
helps kind of uh, make it easier to run and break through as a younger candidate in town. But I'm wondering, what kind of pushback did you receive, if any, from more institutional figures in your city
Mhm.
when you made the decision to jump into the race?
Yeah, two things really stand out to me, that I was young and that I didn't have the experience needed. It's easy for an incumbent or especially an incumbent or an opponent to say, she's never managed a budget of this size, she's never managed a staff of this size, she has no experience. But the reality is, unless you've been a mayor you don't have that experience. So everyone running, unless they're not an incumbent, is going to be in that position. And really important to lean on the experience you do have and transferable skills and professional successes that can really lend themselves to the position and the work of stakeholder involvement, consensus building, leadership, managing budgets, no matter the size, require a similar, skill sets. And so, that experience was one that really stood out. But again, if unless you've been the mayor, no one has the experience of being the mayor. So there's very few of us who can sit on stage and say I'm the most qualified or with the most experience. Um, and then yeah, being young was certainly used against me in a lot of conversations. But there's a lot of benefit to being young in this position too. I have a lot of energy. I have a lot of ideas. Um, I'm out and about a lot. I am flexible and open to new concepts, and um, I'm able to approach this job from a different perspective, and really learn on the job too. So you've got to be able to sort of turn those around into opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that really annoys me about the conversation that we often have about young candidates is about that experience. Young people have experience in
Hmm.
politics. We have that lived experience, like you said, in the school system. If we're running for a school board race, we know who the teachers are,
Yeah.
as our guest said last week. We know
Yeah.
what books are being read in the classroom. We know what curriculum is being taught. So although we don't maybe have a degree that other candidates who are older may have, or as much executive experience in city government, we have lived experience, which matters too.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
so important that you pointed that out.
Yeah, and you talked a little bit just in your opening about the importance of having, representation and diverse candidates. And, for a long time, and this was even hard for me for a long time, I think municipal jobs were really provided preference for local residents. But we don't all live in diverse communities. And so if we're really prioritizing people who live here, we're going to continue to employ and look like the people who live here, right? We're going to have very small candidate pools. And so even being able to promote myself as a local was a little bit hard at times because I do think that we should be hiring people who have other perspectives, who have worked in other areas, who have come from different organizations. And so not having been a mayor may be something that people feel is working against me, but I have experience from a lot of other organizations and institutions in other areas in the country. So I might have lived here and grown up here, but I did actually get to go away for college and grad school, and I studied abroad. And so, and then I worked at other organizations and institutions as a professional in my early career. So I did get that varied experience to bring back to this office with me, and having that variety is just I think is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So also when you're running a campaign as a young person, one of the biggest challenges that people face is just the financial aspect of it. As a young person, by definition, we don't have a lot of experience in the workforce, so we don't have as much money as a lot
Hmm.
of older candidates to invest in our own campaigns. So
Yes.
we have to fundraise. We have to be really good at fundraising, a lot better than an older candidate who is able to self fund.
Hmm.
So, what kind of challenges did you face or successes as a young candidate fundraising for yourself and breaking through in the financial aspect of the campaign?
Yeah, this is something we don't talk about a lot, and it's I sort of want to stand from the rooftops and shout about this, and that this is one of the major, to me, one of the really important reasons that we don't have more young people running for office is because it's just not financially viable. When I decided to run, at the time I was actually working two full-time jobs. I was the director of our Chamber of Commerce and I was a realtor, but I was really truly doing them both full time. And I decided in collaboration and conversation with my board of directors that it would be a conflict for me to continue in my position as a chamber director and be running for office again against the incumbent. And so I had to walk away from that position and take time off unpaid. So that is not something that most people can do. I did have real estate that I was able to continue with, and certainly, as you launch a campaign, there might be people who don't want your name on their front lawn anymore. That were, they weren't as attuned to your politics, and now they're, just thinking about you selling their house has changed a bit. So I was fortunate that I was able to keep some real estate going and had some money in the bank. And I waited as long as I could to launch my campaign so that I could work as long as I could. And then ran a very fast, very intense campaign. And just again, I was in a very fortunate position. I understand that, and that is, I do think, a huge barrier for folks, because I can also see where, if you were still living at home or were, had roommates or in a different situation, I could see the general population using that against you too. So, I was independent. I owned my own home at the time. I had already established myself as an independent person and had bills to pay. And so it was just a little bit different, but still, again, really challenging to get started. The fundraising side of it, to actually run the campaign, some of my professional experience was actually in fundraising. I worked for colleges and universities, and I worked in their alumni and donor relations offices. So I had a very good understanding of what it takes to fundraise and the importance of, at times, depending on the campaign, reaching more donors, but getting perhaps smaller donations. And really took that experience and applied that to my fundraising. I certainly was criticized for the amount of money that I was raising because it did not compare to the incumbents and other candidates that I've run against who have raised a lot of money. We have been a very grassroots campaign, and and it's it has proven that it doesn't take money to win. It takes votes. So you need a little bit of money. You need to get the word out there, but there's other ways to do it too. And we've been very successful in being very grassroots and really paying attention more to the numbers and the voters.
Yeah. And I think you kind of started to answer my next question here, but how much of a campaign is, or for local office rather, is on the ground, and how much of it is, in media advertisements and lawn signs and pamphlets? How much of
Mm-hmm.
it is like is driven by volunteers, and how much of it is actually driven by paid campaigning?
And this might be different depending on where you are in the country and what your community is like, but for us, it was very much on the ground. The more people we spoke to, the more doors we knocked, the more events we had, and direct conversations that I was able to have with voters, the bigger impact we made. We really didn't spend a lot of money on paid media. A postcard here and there. I think our first year we only did one. Again, really kind of a scrappy campaign. To some extent, I think there's more disinterest in the candidates who are sending a lot of really shiny, large mailers. The voters really aren't interested in that anymore. It's actually kind of a turnoff. So we did just a lot of direct conversations, a lot of backyard get-togethers, and really a
Some
lot of
buttons.
social media and a lot of buttons. And yeah, we really don't even spend a lot on swag. I don't do t-shirts. I don't do bumper stickers. I really have, I don't come from a background in politics. That my background is more in community building. It's nuanced but different. And I've really stuck to that. There's some things that to me just really scream politician, and they're just not me, so I'm not going to do them. And so I don't do a lot of those swag pieces and media blitzes. So we've been able to run a really grassroots small. We have a small and lean and mean team.
Yeah. I live sort of close to Amesbury,
Yep.
and I've definitely seen that. I've seen yard signs everywhere around Amesbury every time there's an election.
Yep.
Uh, you have a lot of support on the ground, and from every part of the town, like from the $1 million homes down to like apartments.
Yeah, the lawn signs are funny, right? We always say lawn signs don't vote, but there's different strategies to lawn signs. You could go out and ask people to take a lawn sign because they live in a great location. You really want the visibility, or you could sit back and let them ask for the lawn signs. And I think that is a difference, right? That will tell you, do they really want the lawn sign there, and you can really count on their support, or are
Mhm.
you just borrowing their lawn? And so we really don't ask anyone to take lawn signs. We wait for them to come to us. And, um, I think for the most part in a town like ours, we are officially a city, but feels like a town. So in a town like ours, it just builds momentum and makes people talk.
Yeah, and especially as a young candidate who may not be known around town as much as an older candidate. I mean,
Hmm.
I know you were in a unique situation because you had realty sign like
Yes.
around town before, and people
Yep.
recognized your name. But as a young candidate, having that presence on the ground in the form of advertisements can sometimes be pretty helpful for a
Yeah.
candidate that is less well known.
Hmm.
But I also want to get into actually serving as a mayor in office and kind of what you brought as a really unique type of mayor, both in Massachusetts and I think across the country. You brought a unique strength of being a very, very strong communicator, which I think comes from being a younger person, being a person who engaged on Facebook, who did your city briefings during COVID
Hmm.
on Facebook, meeting people where they were. Um, I guess I'm just wondering how did that work out for you, and what response have you received from people who may have not really gotten to know a politician as well as you before?
Yeah, we took to Facebook very quickly during the pandemic. So I took office in January of 2020, and of course, March changed everything. When I took office, one of the first things I did was add a new position to my office, which was a communications coordinator. And I was highly criticized at the time for doing that too. I have had some people, just actually last week, I was at a meeting and someone pulled me aside and said, "Gosh, I remember how much people, kind of got on you about that position. It is the smartest thing you did." Um, we were starting to talk right away about doing a TV show with our local cable access. It's something that mayors in the past have done, but not the most recent mayor. And we wanted to bring that back. And then when March happened, we really just picked up the camera. We said, how do we talk to people and talk to them right now? And it started with that communications coordinator literally with her cell phone in my face till we realized we should be a little farther apart, and then with masks on. But she just sat in front of my desk and held her cell phone up. Then we got a little nicer camera, but we I just needed to connect with the community, and it made it very casual. Even when I took office, I really wanted to emphasize that I'm still the person you all know that you might have grown up with. Maybe you were my teacher. I'm still your neighbor. The mayor is also a resident average citizen. And so that ability to connect with them and just turn the camera on and catch me in the moment really helped to humanize the experience and connect with everybody in town. So we continued those Facebook Live briefings. We started them every day. We did that for months, and then we went to twice a week, and then once a week, and every 2 weeks. And most recently, we were doing them once a month. We've actually just discontinued them, and we haven't heard anything about it. So it's really also important to be flexible. I said something about that earlier, and be able to respond to what's happening in the community. So folks really aren't looking for information in the same way anymore. So we're looking for other options, but um, that the ability to do that, but then also recognize that not everyone is on Facebook. So we did use our local cable access to live stream that broadcast to our local cable stations and also on their website. So I have some people who winter in the South and they were watching it online. They didn't have to be in Amesbury, they didn't need local cable, and they could just watch on the website. They might not have Facebook either. So we were able to reach lots of different audiences by just being really conscious of that. And I think certainly do think that my age and approach coming into office was that everyone has a device in their hand, right? Lots of people have very quick access. If they don't have it, someone in their family has it. And they have very quick access to information. So there's no reason for us not to be willing as the government, local leaders to not be willing to give them the information. They will find it somehow. So we should really be the leaders in providing it, being transparent and upfront and sharing as much as we can, because you have to you have to expect that they will be doing some googling.
Yeah. And I know last week we were talking former candidate for mayor of New York City,
Mm,
and what he was saying was that young people just want authenticity
yeah.
in politics.
Hmm.
And you brought that authenticity in an incredible way to the mayor's office in Amesbury. And you reached people, far and wide outside of Amesbury that way as well, myself included. But how did you decide to, put yourself in a situation where, in some of those live streams, you were pretty vulnerable. You were crying in some of them and talking about like the death toll in Amesbury,
Yeah.
about COVID. That's something that so many politicians would feel incredibly uncomfortable doing. How did you decide to put yourself in that position?
That's a good question. We we got off of that broadcast. There was one in particular. I did lose it. And we got off the broadcast and looked at each other and my comms director said, "Did you know that was going to happen?" And I said, "No, I had no idea. It just happened." And we really hadn't we'd really been keeping it together in the office for a long time. We were in a real crisis response mode, and you just reach a point where sometimes you're just so frustrated with the people who won't they're it's like they're not listening, it's like they're not taking it seriously, and I felt like I had no control. um yeah, we just hit a breaking point and it happened on camera. So I think that for me this is really personal. This is you know to me this is a lifestyle. It's really not a job. I say that a lot. I don't know what I would be doing if I wasn't doing this. Even when I was the chamber director, I felt like I was in a very similar role. I go to the athletic games at night. I go to the community meals at the high school that are, fundraisers, the crock pot night, the taco night. I go to all of them. I go to the musicals and the plays, and I read to the elementary school kids. It's just what I do. And I feel very connected to everyone in the community. I know a lot of them by name or by face, and they stop me on the sidewalk or out in the shops and restaurants. And um, I don't clock in and clock out. This is everything to me. Um, and I think if your heart is really in it like that, it just shows.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly has. It is breaking through, and it's just, I mean, I can't express how impressive that is
Thanks.
and
Yeah,
how
I
much
mean, there's
courage
there's
that
no
takes
faking
too, to be
it.
vulnerable.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Um,
no faking it. On my good days and my bad, there are days when I'm very
as we all
frustrated.
do, but that's what we want to see in politicians, the ability to express what people actually feel outside of the glamour and the
Mhm. Yeah.
paparazzi, I guess. There's
Sure.
very little paparazzi, I'm sure, as a
Yeah.
as a mayor of a small town, of a small city.
Yes.
But it is authenticity, and it's
Mm,
certainly something unique that you brought to the mayor's office. But I
thank
want to
you.
talk a little about actually like some of the crises that
Mm,
mayors can face. In the past, I guess, week, since the Francis Scott Key Bridge
mm,
collapsed in Baltimore, and the mayor, Brandon Scott, has been serving as the director of all these resources coming in from the state and the federal government. And at any moment, this could kind of be put on any mayor in the country.
yeah.
What kind of a responsibility do you have in a crisis to, putting together an effective um, response from the city.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that could happen any day, and you have to take on this job knowing that anything could happen. Um, I started the job in 2020, and we all sort of thought a financial crisis was coming. We got a health crisis, maybe followed by a financial crisis, not sure. Still, we're still hanging on, I guess. Um, but actual crises on a day-to-day basis within our city, there have been some um really terrible things that have happened in cities across the country, and the mayor gets the call. You could have to be there in an instant, and you don't know how bad it really could be. um I think, thankfully we have a really strong network, at least for me, of women mayors across the country. I have a way to communicate with other women mayors from large and small cities, actually beyond the United States, but predominantly across the country. And so there's someone who has experienced that crisis, which is a great resource to have. But there's some pre-planning that you can do. Having a strong team is really important. Knowing about crisis response and understanding, um, the understanding, your lane, staying, being responsible for, sort of what's under your umbrella. You've got emergency management and fire and police and public works. And, we have, every community is different. We're close to the Seabrook plant. So we have drills and schedules and, response plans for if anything went wrong there, but it's unpredictable. And I think that's the most important thing, is to just be at the ready and trust your team. Um, there are certainly incidents that could happen that don't require the mayor to be the one at the forefront. We've got really strong professionals in emergency management, police and fire again, but there are times when, especially when it affects, human life, that the mayor may need to be the one, to step up or to make the phone call or to visit the family. And you just have to go into it knowing that you might have to do that. And your day can change at the drop of a hat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, I'm sure. Um, One of the crises that a lot of cities across Massachusetts are facing right now, and across New England and really across our world, is the
Hmm.
housing crisis, where, as you said, the economic crisis from COVID is still ongoing, especially for young people.
Yeah.
30% of Gen Z adults still live with their parents because they can't afford a home. What kind of perspective do you bring to the mayor's office when addressing housing as a younger person who I'm sure knows people in your younger community who are struggling to afford housing? And also, I mean, I didn't know you were a realtor before this, but what perspective do you bring on that front?
Yeah, that's been interesting. I did not expect to come into a housing crisis either, but have always really felt strongly that, you'll find yourself in the right place at the right time for the right reasons. And so here I am as a realtor dealing with a housing crisis, and do bring a unique perspective to that. Of course, like many of my peers, when I finished grad school, I moved home too, and I lived there for a short period of time before I was able to get out on my own. I had an apartment, I had roommates, and then I was able to buy a place. I bought a small house, brought my roommates with me to help pay the bills before they could get out on their own. So I don't know that that's terribly different for folks today. It might last longer, just because, again, of housing prices, and the cost of renting or owning, really both at this point. So I do think that I can relate to that experience, um, and have talked a lot about housing since I took office, and the importance to build more housing of all kinds. Follow the market very closely. I understand what's going on with the supply and demand. The fact that a place like Amesbury has less than 10 houses for sale at really any time. And they're really, the prices are so much higher than they were just 2 or 3 years ago. Um, and so have been able to really relate to developers and to property owners about the future of their property and what we could put there, and the importance of filtering, which isn't really happening right now because we don't have a lot of options. There's a lot of people staying in their homes, the homes they raised their family in, that their kids lived in, their 2, 3, 4 bedroom homes that they are now alone in, and they don't live in the second floor. They've almost blocked it off. They've built a bedroom out of their what was a formal dining room. They're living on the first floor. And that's because they have nowhere to go. They really need a place to go so they can pull the equity out of that home. And someone with a family could move into that house. And so we need more housing of all kinds in order to allow that filtering to happen. And that's really the problem that we're having. It's a production problem. And so I can relate to that. I worked with developers who flipped and who built homes, um, and was really in the business. So I think both of those things do give me a different lens. And we right now in Amesbury, we have almost, I would say, over 700 units in the queue to be built in the next 2 or 3 years, because we've been really conscious about the need for more units. Again, of all kinds, all sizes, rental, ownership, just to provide options for people.
Yeah, that's amazing. Um, Also, in a historic community like Amesbury, and like so many communities across New England, when we consider building affordable housing or any new housing, we have to balance that with community preservation efforts. Um, what kind of preservation efforts are you trying to advance in Amesbury, and how are you trying to preserve Amesbury's historic nature while adapting it to, like you said at the beginning, the future and the future
Yeah,
needs?
that's it is really important for a community like Amesbury. We're next to Newburyport. They're a little bit more strict on their historic design standards and their historic district. We don't have historic districts here, but we do have design standards that we set in a lot of our overlay districts, which we are using more and more. We have really been strategic in setting up our design review committee, who is working hard to put out design standards when we adopt new zoning, so that it's really clear what we will and will not accept in that district, with visuals, so that developers can see what we prefer and what we don't. Um, we have a great staff in our planning department who is really conscious of this. We've used our historic preservation restrictions on older homes that are being converted into condos, and even have some ADUs. We wrote and passed an accessory dwelling unit ADU zoning late last year in December, and we had visuals and design standards in there as well, again, to preserve a lot of our historic architecture. We have a lot of carriage barns, or carriage houses and barns in our neighborhoods, and they can be great places to live, but we want them to remain, you know, part of our historic landscape. So I think we approach it from a variety of ways, and are conscious of the new developments that are going in. We want them to blend into, while also preserving what we have.
Yeah. Um, I want to talk about education before we wrap up here, because it's a perspective that I think a lot of young people and a lot of young mayors and candidates for local office think of very differently from
Mm.
older candidates. What kind of scholarship programs do you have for young people in your community?
So it's a great question. We have a ton of scholarships for our high school graduates. When they're a senior and they are looking at continuing on in a variety of ways. It could be college, it could be a career training. We have scholarship options for both. Um, and and some of those scholarships require a transcript being turned in, and some of them don't. Some of them they just give you the cash and wish you the best. And so I think there's a lot of options for folks. We also offer an alternative spring semester for our high school seniors. It's called Pass. It's a program for alternative spring semester. And so we've actually had seniors work in City Hall and join us in their spring semester. If they've earned enough classes or enough credits to graduate, they can actually take that semester to go out and get some on the job experience, which has been really great too. So we also have what's it called? I always forget. Our high school gets to take classes with two local colleges. And they take them at a very discounted rate. So you can actually earn college credits while you're still in school. I assume that your school does something similar.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have that as a great option. Recently, we've actually had some of our high school graduates actually get their associate's degree before they got their high school diploma
Wow.
because they got so many credits. So that's been really cool to see. We have some students who are, very dedicated to their studies. And one of the conversations we've been having lately is how to add youth representation to a lot of our boards and commissions. We are doing we're doing a review of our boards and commissions right now. It's the committee on committees, because that is what happens in government. And so we're reviewing all of our boards and commissions and their purpose, their actions, their sort of structure, the demand for membership. Is it something that's really popular and we always have people interested, or is it one that we really struggle for? So that we could perhaps downsize some of our boards and commissions if there's some overlap or commonalities. And then part of our recommendation coming out of that will be which boards could sustain a young membership, a youth membership position. So we're going to try to get people involved that way too. We do have our student advisory council at the school committee. They have a rep that sits on the school committee, which is actually by law, but I don't know that it's consistent across the board because it can be hard to get that representative to attend and be a regular voice for the students. So we have a good partnership with our student advisory council, and we have that member of our young of our youth at our table for school committee too.
Yeah, that's really important.
Yeah.
But it's also really important to have elected young people like you and like people much younger than you as well, serving in elected office across the city. So what advice do you have for young candidates who are considering running for municipal office, either in Massachusetts or elsewhere?
My advice for young people running for office is to my advice would be to connect with other electeds, observe the board or position that you're interested in running for. So if you want to run for city council, go to city council meetings. If you want to run for school committee, go to school committee meetings and do some research, but then go for it. It certainly helps to have, I'll say alliances, but connections to people already on those boards who they may not be up for reelection. So you want to lock arms with someone and get someone to pull you along and lift you up, open that door for you. But I say go for it. Do some research, get involved, and go for it.
And where do you see your political future going after leaving the mayor's office?
This is it. I love the mayor's office. I don't want to be anywhere else. I'll stay here as long as I can. And then maybe I'll hit the stage or I'll be on my own podcast. I'll just talk about it later.
All right. Well, we wish you luck on your podcast endeavors in the future. Happy to support you here at Pod Save the Youth. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. This has been Mayor Kassandra Gove of Amesbury, Massachusetts. I'm your host, David Seaton, and listen next time on Pod Save the Youth.